Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on The Rape of Lucrece, which is a very long poem about sexual violence towards women and suicidal ideation. So if either of those are triggers for you, well, actually today might be one that you can listen in on, because today we're going to be talking about a painting. I am going to be making references to what happened before, so if you want to skip ahead just a little smidge, we're looking at stanzas 197 to 200. And we've reached the part of the poem where Lucretia is she's just killing time, is what she needs to do. This feels a little bit like that random little scene that they throw in, like Act 4, Scene 3, that's really just there because the lead actors need time to change their costumes backstage before they come out and kick off Act 5. But, you know, she was grieving and feeling guilty and all that all through the night and crying and all this stuff, and now she's written a letter to Collatine asking him to come home, and she gave it to a messenger, and there was a weird moment where they both blushed, like for different reasons, him because he was talking to her, and her because she thought that he could see on her the fact that she had been sort of defiled. But now that the messenger has gone off, she's like, okay, so what do I do until Collatine gets here? So she goes to look at this painting that exists in her home of the Siege of Troy. And in the last stanza from yesterday, we learned that this is actually a very good painting. And Shakespeare picks up there in stanza 197, continuing to describe the painting by saying, "A thousand lamentable objects there, in scorn of nature, art gave lifeless life. Many a dry drop seemed a weeping tear shed for the slaughtered husband by the wife. The red blood reeked to show the painter's strife, and dying eyes gleamed forth their ashy lights like dying coals burnt out in tedious nights. There might you see the laboring pioneer begrimed with sweat and smeared all with dust. And from the towers of Troy there would appear the very eyes of men through loopholes thrust, gazing upon the Greeks with little lust. Such sweet observance in this work was had that one might see those far-off eyes look sad. In great commanders grace and majesty you might behold, triumphing in their faces. In youth, quick bearing and dexterity. And here and there the painter interlaces pale cowards, marching on with trembling paces, which heartless peasants did so well resemble that one would swear he saw them quake and tremble. In Ajax and Ulysses, ho, 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 what art of physiognomy might one behold! The face of either ciphered either's heart, their face, their manners most expressly told. In Ajax' eyes, blunt rage and rigor rolled, but the mild glance that sly Ulysses lent showed deep regard and smiling government. So we're describing a painting, basically, is what's happening here, and getting into the nitty-gritty of it, saying that, first of all, that this is an amazing, very realistic painting that she's looking at. You know, these little drops of paint actually look like the tears that the wives are crying and all that sort of thing. And then he describes a few of the people that you see in the painting. Like, here's this guy who's, you know, covered in grime, and over there you can see people peeping out through the windows, and the eyes in those windows are so expertly drawn that they almost even look sad as they're watching this war rage on outside. And in the faces of the commanders you can see, you know, triumph and bravery and confidence, and in the young ones you can see them, you know, all like, you know, dexterous and ready to go and ready to get at it. But there's also in the painting a bunch of people who have maybe been drafted into this war that are marching off, and they seem so full of dread that you can almost see them shaking with fear as they're marching off to the war. And then in the last of these stanzas, he describes Ajax and Ulysses, sort of the two most central characters in this, or two of the most central characters in this poem, and just saying that their faces capture their emotions so well. You can see Ajax's rage and rigor, but you see Ulysses, like, you can see the gears turning in his head. He's got this like sly look going on. So we're not quite done describing this painting, and it's I mentioned before that this feels a little bit like we're just allowing the actors to change costumes backstage, but this is a poem. It's not a play that necessarily needs to have somebody changing their costume backstage. But I do also think that it's interesting that Shakespeare yet again is referencing Helen of Troy, the story of the siege of Troy over Helen. It makes sense in this context because there is also like the rape, the sexual component, all of that stuff. But this is a story that is told often. It comes up obviously in Troilus and Cressida. It comes up in Hamlet. He references this a lot, and it almost makes me wonder, like, did he just hear this story once and it impacted him so much that it appeared in so many of his other works? Or was he like a really lazy student, and of all of the things that he was supposed to read in school, maybe this is the only one that he actually read. So that's why it's the one that he keeps going back to reference other things. Yeah, I had a chuckle as I was thinking about that. But we're going to hear more about this painting in the coming days because there is going to be a payoff, I promise. You know, all of this talking about other stuff, it's a little bit... Another analogy, it's a little bit like the while they're searching for Horcruxes bit. It's the very slow, boring part of the book, but it does have a payoff at the end. So this description of the poem, yes, it's beautiful and flowery. It doesn't really advance the plot of this poem very much, but it will come to a payoff a few more stanzas down the road. So we'll get there. Come on back tomorrow for more, and I'll see you then. Mwah.